Hi there. Welcome to Office Hours with Distinctions for Life, where I help you get what you really want in life with small changes that make a big difference. I'm Ron Davis. Thank you for tuning in. I've began doing these live streams during the great pandemic of 2020. And I am still figuring out exactly what they mean, but I did them so I could connect with interesting people. There's very little format to these shows, and their purpose is whatever I want it to be on that day. I've invited today's guest for a number of reasons. We're fellow Toastmasters, and she's always impressed me. She has a noble vocation, which we'll talk about in a minute. And she's also very flexible. And I see her doing all these crazy yoga poses on her Facebook page all the time, which is not today's topic because Ron doesn't want to be shamed with his lack of flexibility. But please help me welcome. And I was thinking about this, people. You could actually put the clap emoji in the comments. So you'll have to look up how to do the clap emoji, but feel free to do it anytime during the show. And please help me welcome Katherine Bisson. Or Bisson. I know that you answer to either one. Bisson is the version.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
And Katherine, can you tell people what it is that you do?
Yes. So I'm the executive director of Abilene Hope Haven, which is a nonprofit, and we serve people that are experiencing homelessness. I think a key thing there, even just in language, is huge. So we don't like to say homeless people because we don't feel like someone's housing situation is a trait of a person. It's more of a situation. And so we like to say people experiencing homelessness. And our mission is to inspire hope in the lives of our neighbors that are experiencing homelessness here in Abilene. And a fundamental way in doing this, I know it's a shocker to some people, is through housing. You would be really surprised that, people think food, if you just give them basic needs, that's definitely needed in the moment. And we can't get to everyone that we encounter and house them right away. But ultimately, we want to connect them to housing. And that's our mission here at Hope Haven. And I originally got into social work, into the field, because I'm adopted. And I had a great experience, have a wonderful family. And I wanted to be a part of that for others, for other babies that, were in CPS or in foster care. And God had other plans for me. And kind of, that's something I hopefully we can get more into today. But I kind of went with this path that was leading me down a different direction into working with people experiencing homelessness. And I've never looked back, and I absolutely love it. And it's one of my biggest passions.
Yeah, this all started actually because you made a post to Facebook, not one of the bendy ones, but you made a post to Facebook with a picture of you sitting on the front porch of your new house. And
Yeah.
you were talking in that about something that most people consider a burden, but you were considering it sort of a milestone in your life, which was you got to make your first mortgage payment.
Yes.
And that caught my eye immediately because so often we look at like things are good or bad, right? Like it's bad to have a mortgage. Well, it's good to have a mortgage because that means you have a house, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's one of those quality problems. But you looked on that as a milestone, and in that, you talked about the fact that like 5 years ago, you kind of couldn't conceive of yourself being that kind of person, the person who would own a house
Absolutely.
or do the things that you do. And so that's why I wanted to get you on the show, was because I'm always interested in transformation, and how people can go from one state of existence, which sounds really weird way to put it, but to
Mhm.
another. And I think a lot of times that is because of like what the pictures we have in our head of ourselves, our own
Oh,
beliefs. So can you talk a little about where you were and how what that process was like?
yes. So 5 years ago, I was actually living in North Dakota, which, if anyone knows anything about me, my favorite season of the whole year is summer. And I love the sun and the warmth and all of that. And so I was kind of just in a state very far away from everyone I knew. I was bartending and had another part time job and just kind of living this existence of just surviving in a way. And really, a lot of my issues stemmed from alcohol and other substances. And really, it took a lot for me. And I never thought, I mean, it was hard enough for me to just afford an apartment and just, low income living, basically. And so for me to go from that to being able to purchase a home for me was just amazing. And I think for me, there's a quote that I really love, and it's called "Pain is the touchstone of spiritual growth or progress." So I went through a lot of pain um, in my life, and more so in my young adulthood. And so for me, that pain, I think some people, and I fell into this first category, so I'm not downing anyone that does this, but you can either kind of immerse yourself in that pain and you can sort of just do things to numb it out or do things that are unhealthy. It doesn't have to be substances, it can be food, it could be shopping, it could be a number of things that we all have something we struggle with. And so changing that pain and making it more of a catalyst for change is something that really I embrace eventually, not at first. And I feel like that's what led me to be able to start taking small steps, being able to afford my rent, being able to start to save up money, being able to take steps to get my master's degree. Things that I could have never, ever imagined in a million years, that I'd be able to complete a thesis and, graduate with honors and all of that. Like, just starting small and taking it the one day at a time. And that's really helped me a lot because I'm one that likes to think a little bit far ahead into the future. So I have this sort of, what is that? A crystal ball, but my crystal ball there's never anything good in there. So when I'm projecting the future, it's always negative, or that's where my mind goes to. And I've had to sort of almost rewire my brain in a sense to think, okay, good outcomes can be in store for me. It might not be what I think it is, or it might not be where I want to be in a certain amount of time, but just really holding on. And that's why I love Hope Haven, is that hope. To me, that is huge in my life, being able to really have that. And for me, it's about people. So if I have people in my life that support me and that can help me to see the good in myself, if I don't see it, that really encourages me to believe more in myself. I have a lot of issues of not feeling good enough and having a lot of negative self-talk. I'm not smart enough, I'm not funny enough, I'm not outgoing enough, or whatever the case is, fill in the blank. And we all have those. And so I think identifying that is the first step, but then being willing to believe that there's a different dialogue for you. One last little piece, and I'll let you ask a little more questions, is I think a lot of people are guilty of comparing your insides to other people's outsides, especially in the world with social media. You see a little picture on Facebook or Instagram. You mentioned the yoga pictures. It's taken me about 10 years to be able to do some of the poses that I do. But some other people look at it and think, oh, I could never do yoga, I'm not flexible. That's only a part or a snippet of the story. They don't see all of the times I've fallen, or all of the yoga practices that I've been to, and, to get me to that point. So I think it's really about not always comparing yourself to others.
I always love it when I do the very thing I talk about. And that's exactly what I did, right? Like I said, you are like super flexible. And like, I just said, that's the way Katherine is, right? I didn't say Katherine worked to become that flexible, because I'm a firm believer that at least 90% of the time you can do anything that somebody else can do, right?
Yeah.
There are physical limits that can keep you from doing that. But if you think, oh, I want to do, I want to be able to stand on my head. And if I decided, hey, I want to be able to stand on my head, I know I would go look for a role model, right? I would say, I'm going to go find a guy in his 50s who can stand on his head. And then I'm going to do what he did. Right. But it's so easy, like you say, to see the end product and think, well, I can't get that end product. And that's kind of what happened. When I hear your story, I hear you saying that, like, you were here you are in Montana bartending, and you were like, I could never have a house, for instance,
Yeah.
right? That end product is just impossible. And then that holds you back. That's the belief that
Oh,
keeps you from
absolutely.
ever moving forward.
Because you
Uh,
don't take the steps because you don't believe that it's possible. So why would you even take that first step that's needed? Even with my job and my position, I've never viewed myself as a leader. And so for me, I just thought executive director, I mean, even when I got the position, it was this imposter syndrome of like, well, I
yeah.
don't deserve this, or this isn't, they made a mistake or something. But in reality, I took the steps, I got the education, I had the passion, I worked really hard at the other positions I had prior at Hope Haven. And so I think too, sometimes it's just really digging deep and knowing what you are doing is making a difference and acknowledging progress that you've made has been huge for me, which is why I need other people in my life to point it out sometimes,
Yeah.
and say, hey, you are doing a great job and we really admire. And as far as the flexibility goes, I grew up an athlete. So, I mean, I might have had some strength, but I was never flexible. That was for sure something I had to work really hard at. And so you can definitely, maybe we should do a Toastmasters yoga class sometime.
I think there are other people at our Toastmasters who would be much more advanced than others, because you're not the only instructor. In yoga, what do you call a person who's a super yogi person?
A yogi.
A yogi,
Mhm.
like the bear.
Yeah.
You're not the only one in our group that's that way. But it's funny. I always tell people to sidetrack on yoga. I did P90X a few years ago. Boy, that's probably decades ago. But anyway, I did it, and the only part of that I couldn't do was the yoga. It was like the
Oh,
yoga was the hard part, and not just the flexibility, just sort of there is strength involved too in a lot of those poses, and sort of that's an interesting thing because there is strength involved, but it's like strength in a weird way, if that makes sense. You're just
yeah,
put into a position where you're using muscles you wouldn't normally use to do a
yeah,
particular thing,
yeah.
and that's actually a good thing. When I last time I had a personal trainer, I picked her out because she did a particular kind of personal training called FMS, functional muscle system. Anyway, and it is all about using using the muscles you don't normally use. She's always said when people asked her to explain it, says, if you ever stepped off a step you didn't know was there and your body goes and jerks, it's all those muscles. Those are the ones we work.
Yeah. And yoga actually really has helped me to kind of push past some of those self-limiting beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
because certain poses or just certain things that didn't think I could ever do, it kind of showed me, wow, my body is truly amazing and capable of a lot of things if I put in the work and the discipline and the action that it was.
So let's go back in time again to you sitting behind or standing. And no, most bartenders don't sit. Standing behind a bar somewhere in Montana, and what was it that made you say, okay, either okay, something's got to change, but more importantly, I can change.
I would go back to the misery and the pain aspect of it. I was desperate enough to go, okay, like, because I think with any addiction or with any cycle, like we see cycles of poverty, of abuse, things like that. With any cycle, I feel like you're just, even homelessness, that's a great example. So people see a man that stands out on the side of the corner, of the street and panhandles and think, oh, he just wants to live that way. I absolutely don't agree with that. I think he's gotten accustomed. Like it's just like, well, this is what it is. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
anything better. This is who I am. And so I had gotten to that point where I just kind of accepted it for a while. But then there was enough consequences or enough, for me, it was more the mental and the spiritual discomfort and pain that drove me to be like, okay, there has to be, I don't want to continue living like this. But I also don't want to die. So I don't know. I have to do something else. The good thing is I knew of a lot of recovery-based programs already at this point in my life. So I think that's what made it a little bit easier for me to be able to start that path and that journey towards recovery, and knowing, oh, I can immediately go and connect with a group in a room full of people that understand me, but also know a solution that's worked for them and a different way of living.
All right. So you got to the I must change point.
Yes. Yes.
Which is often where we have to get is just like you can't say I want to change. A lot of people say I want to change, but they don't say I must change, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to do that, to make that change. And then you mentioned another thing I thought was interesting. You knew where to go.
Yeah.
And I think probably a lot of people in those situations don't know where to go.
Yeah, I see that every day at my job, and it's weird because that's what I also drives me to work harder as an executive director and do better and make our services better and just think of different ways we can improve our programs. But it also is sad because I've been there, so I know, man, if we could just really give them to those resources that they need, or the information and the relationship. Because for me, I had people that already supported me, my family and a few close friends that supported me in that change process. A lot of the people we encounter, that's not the case. And so we want to be a part of that process for them.
Yeah. You also, it's funny because you're telling a story, and it's stuff I've heard before, not necessarily of you, but you hear these themes. With that one was there's this identity thing that we have too, right? Like if you talked about it when you changed the language about homelessness, but you also talked about it when you were giving the example a minute ago, that they've become accustomed to it and they think this is just the way I am, or this is who I am. Even worse, right? It's like I am identified as whatever this thing is that is changeable. Maybe not easily changeable, but it is changeable. And so once you internalize that as your identity, then it's even harder to break out of that.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. We see that
I
a lot.
do.
It's funny because I feel like I'm glad you brought that up, because I feel it's my duty to educate the public and make them aware, hey, these are human beings and they're not that different from me and you. You know, they've had different circumstances or maybe a different family or come from a different background or different trauma. But oftentimes I forget the people that we serve themselves. Sometimes we need to educate them and make them aware this is not who you are. This is a
Right.
part of your story, but it's not your identity.
And another thing that I've done personally in my life, and it's funny because we keep talking about yoga, but I remember one period of time I was working out, and one of the things I thought about, when I meant working out, I mean like one time I was working out, I meant I was working on a regular basis, was
Yeah.
I changed my identity. I stopped saying I was someone who needed to work out, and I started saying I was an athlete. Right.
Mm.
So I changed the name I tried to label myself, and labeled myself as an athlete. And an athlete has a whole different set of motivations. And an athlete does a whole different set of things. And
Yeah.
an athlete doesn't do things that a couch potato does do, right?
Right.
And so if we can get our own internal change to happen, if we can change our own identity, that will facilitate a whole bunch of other changes you don't even know how to do.
Yeah.
So if you can, if you can also identify this state you're in as temporary. Like one of my favorite sayings is "This too will pass." Probably a pretty relevant one right now to most
Oh,
of the people
yeah.
in the world, right? Like this too will pass.
Mhm.
Someone was like, I was listening to a thing today, and they were saying, "I don't know if the Texas economy can." I believe the Texas economy will recover, right? And I was like, well, it doesn't really have any choice. Right. Like whether, let's say that we had pandemic for the rest of existence. Well, the economy is going to have to adapt. It
Yeah.
doesn't cease to exist. Right. We're
Yeah.
not going to not come out of this, but um, it can feel that way when you're in the moment.
Absolutely. And I know from personal experience what that feeling is, and I think that's why I'm blessed even for my negative experiences, because it allows me to have the compassion and empathy, for people that are on the street, are living outdoors and things like that.
So you said something a minute ago talking about uh, talking to the public and convincing them that these people are human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm just going to, I want to say push back. That's not right. Um, I don't really think that most people don't think they're human beings.
Yeah.
I think, and would be to some extent how I would think, is I just don't know how to relate to them per se.
Yeah.
And I'll tell a story. Not that was my plan today to tell this story, but recently, this was the end of February, back when we could still travel, and I was in Atlanta, and in the middle of it was at night, and I was in downtown Atlanta, and I would just gone to a thing, and I came out of this pub that we were at, and I needed to find a Walgreens to buy something. I don't even remember what I needed to buy. Tums probably, and I came out, and there was a homeless guy with a bicycle, and he was out there, and he was like, "Hi," and I was like, "Hi," and he said, "What are you looking for?" And I said, "Well, I'm trying to get to the CVS, and the map says there is one here, but I can't really figure out how to get there." And he goes, "Well, come on, I'll take you." And I said, "Okay." And so I started walking with the guy, and he's like, "I just want to tell you thank you." And I was like, "Why? Why are you telling me thank you?" "Well, because you didn't see color." So he was black, and he said, "You didn't see color, and but you just treated me like a human being." And I was like, "Oh, well, you're welcome." Seems kind of weird to me. And of course, part of my head was going, it wasn't about the color of your skin; it was the fact that you were homeless, right?
Right.
Um, and that would be a bigger stumbling block to me than the color of his skin. And then he walked me all the way to Walgreens and told me part of his story. And, uh, I ended up giving him some money and praying for him at the end. And, but it was interesting because I guess to tell this whole story was I actually did know how to relate to him, didn't I? Like I thought I didn't.
Yeah.
But I just treated him like I would have treated any stranger on the street. Like, yeah, I would have been cautious. Like, I don't care who you are. If you just walk
Yeah.
up to me and I don't know who you are in downtown Atlanta in the middle of the night, I'm going to be cautious.
Yeah.
But I'm not treating you necessarily different. So, how would you say, like, when you're trying to educate people and they were saying, well, it's not that I don't think they're human. It's just like I don't know how to, maybe I'm afraid, right? I am afraid. There's fear too. There's no
Yeah.
ways about that.
So for me, and I like that you caught that, because I don't think it's that they don't believe they're a human being, but I think the way that people experiencing homelessness are treated sometimes is inhumane.
Mm-hmm.
There's small examples, there's big examples of this. A lot of times when we have people come into our office, even if it's just a walk-in, we always offer them coffee and water and just treat them with just dignity and respect, like they're just just someone else that's coming in for a meeting with me or something. We treat them the same way. And we get that same comment, "Thank you for just treating me like a human being." And that to me tells the story of, well, that must mean there's a lot of people that don't treat you that way. You
Mm-hmm.
know, this is so small, but because money, we all know panhandling and money is a hot topic issue in the world of homelessness.
Yeah.
And to me, it's whatever you feel led to do. I'm not going to weigh in one way or another. I would just encourage people. I think their biggest worry with that is, well, what if they just spend it on drugs and alcohol? And my response is to that, if it's $1, is there every dollar that you accounted for in your own personal budget that is not a frivolous thing that you spend it on? Do you not buy wine sometimes or different? It's just, to me, it's like, if that's how you're going to be giving, then you shouldn't be giving for sure.
Mm-hmm.
If you're having that feeling in your heart about it, then it's probably not going to help that person. But even just making eye contact, it seems so simple, but really they're in poverty, obviously, but also there's a social poverty that goes along with it, where that they really crave that human connection. And so just making eye contact, if you don't want to give money and they ask for it, just say, "No, I don't have any," or, not today, but are you doing okay? How's your day? Just making small talk is really, sometimes they just want their voice to be heard and they want to know that their life matters. And also kind of educating yourself as far as what shelters in the area are available, or what different homeless programs are there in your community, I think is really helpful, and giving a number or giving an address so that they can get the help that they need. I think to me, it's a really big deal. I don't encourage people to transport someone that you don't know. Like that's just, I don't do that. I do it for people that we know that we're working with. I wouldn't say that I've never done it, but I know from a safety perspective, it's not really good practice to just pick up people in your car and drive them to where they need to go. You do want to have a level of safety. And that's just, even if they were homeless or not, you wouldn't be picking up strangers and giving them a ride. So,
yeah. I think there's oftentimes things where I don't know, it's kind of a two-sided thing. It's probably very interesting. Now, let me back this all up. Sometimes we do things and the people we're doing it to have a set of beliefs about why we did it.
yeah.
So for instance, the guy in Atlanta whose name I got and just now I'm forgetting it, but he thought if people ignore him, they're ignoring him because he's black.
Yeah.
Right. And I think sometimes if people don't make eye contact with somebody who's homeless, they may think it's because I'm homeless.
Yeah.
But that person may not make eye contact with anybody.
Right.
Right. We were talking earlier before it started about being an introvert, and introverts don't know how to make small talk, right? Like they're afraid of it. And the fact that they're afraid of small talk doesn't make it any easier when it's a stranger who's obviously living on the street, right? Like that's even harder. And so they may ignore that person or not want to engage them. And so don't look, all of those things, but they're not necessarily because they're homeless.
It's funny you say that because so we do outreach and we just started doing it in 2019 back in the spring. And it's been one of my biggest passion projects within the organization. As was a huge gap in our system. And so we started engaging more with that. And so I felt like I really need to have my boots on the ground for this one. And I need to be there and seeing the operations like from the field and how everything's working together in order to feel comfortable handing this off to my staff,
So what is outreach?
So outreach is basically kind of what it sounds like. You just go to the streets, you go to encampments, which for anyone watching that doesn't know, an encampment is basically, so we all have probably gone camping before in the woods or in a park. This is like that, but you don't have another option. You're not going home at the end of the weekend. Like it's a permanent living situation for the foreseeable future for a lot of folks in our community. And they're really hidden in the woods. So you have to really know people who know people to find the locations and things like that. So outreach is important because people that have been homeless for a long period of time are not walking up to Hope Haven and asking for help. Right. So they're the ones that are the most vulnerable in our community. They're the least likely to survive on the streets due to chronic health conditions, not having their basic hygiene and other needs met. And so it's kind of been my passion to reach out and make sure that they know of what we have to offer. But you really have to work on building that relationship before you just say, hey, we have this available for you. Because they're pretty jaded by society and by organizations that have done them wrong in the past. And just basic human trust is just hard for them. And so we've really implemented going out there at least twice a week to different hotspot locations and engaging with people that are sleeping out in the encampments under certain bridges in town or in their cars, abandoned buildings, etc. And so the reason I bring that up is because I am an introvert. And so when we started doing this, I was really worried about how is the person that hates small talk the most and doesn't like going up to strangers, like how is this going to work out, And it was so interesting how, and this is why I do believe that this is my calling, because when I was out there, like that was not even a worry that I had. And I think it's because I was so focused on meeting the needs of other people, I didn't have time to be caught up in the worries of myself and what people are thinking about me or what am I not enough of? It was so focused on someone else or something greater that I didn't have that same reaction that I usually have in similar situations like that, groups of people or strangers that I don't know.
I find back when I considered myself an introvert, which I think everybody who knows me from Abilene has they're like, what? You were an introvert? But back then, if you had a mission, like if you had a reason that you were doing something, I remember leading a small group in college for church, but I was an introvert, right? I didn't talk to people. I didn't like go start conversations. But when you're a small group leader, you got to start conversations. Like you just
Yeah.
got to. That's just what you do, right? So you've got this. Once you have this role, almost like you're putting on a new identity. Like when I put this identity on, I'm the kind of person who talks to people.
Yeah,
Uh, and
absolutely.
that was actually the thing that made the big change for me was, first of all, I don't believe in the false dichotomy of introvert versus extrovert. I think A, it would be a range, and B, it's also very contextual. Like you may be super outgoing when you're going to an anime party and hate networking events in the Better Business Bureau, right? Like there's two
Yes.
different
Yes.
contexts, and so saying that you're an introvert and trying to put that on as an identity as opposed to I feel introverted in this situation, uh, are two different things. But having a mission, having a reason, is that, and I think there are some tricks to do too to make small talk.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think if I've talked about them on the show or not. Maybe I have. I don't think I have. So I think I'll do a distinction on tricks to making small talk.
You should. You should.
Yeah.
I've read many articles about it because for me, it is the small talk or in settings where I don't know people that it comes up the most. And so I've read a lot of articles, and then in the moment I panic and I don't remember any of what I've read. But you give me hope and I like that because you're right. It goes back to what we were talking about, identity. So if you identify this is who I am versus this is how I react in certain situations, I think it can make a big difference. So.
I put Hope Haven's domain in the chat for people who are interested in following up. Yeah, the book I recommend now is called Captivate, and it's by Vanessa Van Edwards. I don't know, like I'm trying to remember how long we've been together in Toastmasters. If you haven't heard me talk about Captivate or not, but she teaches a lot of those. She calls herself a recovering awkward person, and
That's so
she
great.
teaches a lot of those things. And my favorite story, and I'll tell this one. My number one thing to make yourself a better small talk people is to be a good listener.
Yeah.
And when I was walking with the homeless guy, the guy experiencing homelessness in Atlanta, that's like a hard thing to change. Most of the time I was just listening. I was just listening to his story, right? And just asking enough questions to keep him talking, which is part of it. So one of the stories Vanessa tells is that she had a coworker who said, Vanessa, you interrupt people all the time. She's like, I don't interrupt people. It's like, no, you do. You interrupt people all the time. You really need to work on that. So she decided to fix that. And the way she decided to fix it was take a vow of silence. But she wouldn't cancel any appointments she already had, including networking events. So she went to she had these little cards made that said, I took a vow of silence. And I'd really like to know you, but I can't talk.
Right.
And she went to some networking event and she met this woman and she gave her the card. The woman's, it said, hi, how are you? And she gave her the card and she goes, oh, you're taking a vow of silence. And then she started telling her stories and talking to her and all this other stuff. And Vanessa never said anything, right? All she was doing was listening. And she said she got a letter from the lady like a day or two later that said, oh, I really enjoyed our conversation. You were such a great conversation. I'm like, she's like, I literally said nothing. And
that's great.
Yet I was a great conversationalist. I mean, I don't know that like you can actually not say anything, but if your goal is to listen more than, just to keep them talking, I think you find that they're going to think you're a great conversationalist and you're going to learn interesting things.
That gives me hope because I think I am a good listener. So yeah, maybe I have better skills than what I think I have.
Oh, sorry, my wife is watching on the stream. She said something just went wrong. So if anybody else is experiencing that, just comment there. And if not, you can check out the recording because this will be actually be viewed much more after we're done than it is while we're on there. Well, it has been a little over half an hour, and that's generally how long I like to make these things be. So, Katherine, how can people find out more about Hope Haven and maybe about you? Just I'm going to let you tell us how they can find out more about you.
Sounds good. So you can find us at www.abilenehopehaven.org. And I also highly encourage people to follow us on Facebook. You can just type in Abilene Hope Haven and we'll pop right up. Like our page, because we do a lot of videos, photos, and up-to-date information about what we're currently doing here at Abilene Hope Haven. And thank you so much, Ron, for having me. It's been great.
It was great to have you on the show. Thanks, Katherine. So that is another episode of Distinctions for Life office hours. And if you would like to find out more about Distinctions for Life, you can always subscribe if you're on YouTube. You can follow the page on Facebook, and you will be notified when we come out with new live streams. I'm trying to do live streams every Tuesday and Thursday for at least the foreseeable future, at least through June. So if there is anything you might be interested in seeing, or anyone you'd like to see on the show, you can always contact us via distinctionsforlife.tv, our website, my website, or my whatever. And thank you for having tuned in today. And I do encourage you to go see what Hope Haven is doing. It's interesting because when Katherine got on, she was at her office, and I had not thought. I just think right now that everybody is at home, except unless you work in like a grocery store or a hospital. I think you're at home, and I know that's incorrect, but it's obvious that there are lots of people in our community that are experiencing homelessness, and they still need the services that places like Hope Haven provide. So I would encourage you again to go find Hope Haven, AbileneHopehaven.org. Check that out. Maybe make a donation in these times when times are tough for them. And there will be a new Distinction for Life coming out on Sunday. This Sunday's distinction is about how to look better on webcam or Zoom, giving you some tips on lighting and camera positioning and stuff like that, so that when you're on those now ubiquitous Zoom calls, you will be the person who stands out. And until then, have a great day, a great weekend. And I need a good ending. What do I want my good ending to be? Okay. Until next time, this is Distinctions for Life, where I hope you get... Hey, thanks for tuning in, and I will see you later. Goodbye.